Welcome to Raving Ryan. I'm your host, Ryan Anastasio. Today we have a very special guest, the Commissioner of the Connecticut Department of Education, Dr. Miguel Cardona. Commissioner, how are you? Thanks for coming on.
I'm well. Thank you for having me. Glad to be with you this morning. And I don't have a Raving Ryan cup, but I think that's because we're doing this virtually. Thank you for having me.
And I'll make sure I'll send you a cup when this is all over.
Thank you.
So I want to first talk about the decision that was made yesterday, and you and Governor Lamont decided to extend the closure date for schools until May 20th. Why did you make that decision, and what exactly went into it?
Sure. So the decision to further cancel school is a very big decision. It's one that takes into account many different factors, most importantly, public safety. We knew that April 20th wasn't enough. We had to move it further, but we wanted to provide an opportunity for a decision later that might, depending on where things are, include some level of engagement with students. I think if we were to cancel for the remainder of the year, it would probably make it much more difficult if there were activities or at least engagement with students into June. We do, I think in the comment yesterday, it was very clear that we do reserve the right to extend cancellations further. And given the projections, it's likely, but we wanted to do it 1 month out to see if there's any opportunity later to examine that.
Yeah, and the governor said that he thinks that schools will probably not go back into session this year. Where do you stand on that? Do you think that students can be back in classrooms this school year?
As much as I would love to see students go back for that sense of closure, again, I said yesterday, I have a sophomore and an eighth grader, and I know they want to go back, but I do think that based on the data that we're seeing now, it's likely that cancellations will continue into the summer, including potentially summer school and any planning for compensatory services that might be done in districts.
And when will that decision be made? Will it be like right before that May 20th date?
Mm-hmm. Well, the decision to extend cancellations was made 10 days before the actual date. So I think, the public should expect before the 20th of May to know where. I would say at least a week, or I'd say about a week before, so that planning could happen.
Yeah, and I'm in my senior year of high school, and many seniors are wondering what's going to happen with graduation. I know you said yesterday that we will celebrate the class of 2020. What do you think it's going to look like? Do you think we're going to be having these big graduation ceremonies where thousands of people commence in one area?
Ryan, the reality is, I believe that moving forward, things are going to look very different. And I don't mean just for the next year. This idea of having large congregations is something that I think people are going to rethink in a lot of different venues. Simple things like handshaking too is something that I wonder, what's that going to look like in a year from now or 2 years from now?
You think you'll be handshaking after this?
I don't. A lot of fist bumping, a lot of elbow bumping, But to go back to your question, last week I had the privilege of joining a Zoom call with about 20, 25 students that are high school students from throughout Connecticut. It was put together by the Connecticut Association of Schools. So I listened to juniors and seniors primarily on topics like distance learning, graduation, prom, the things that they were thinking about. And it was so eye-opening just to be reminded that this time in their lives is such a critical, important, they've been waiting for this for years. You've been waiting for this for years. And we, as decision makers, as school leaders, district leaders, state leaders, need to take into account the impact that a decision would have on these students and those experiences. And I think they were all very articulate, and they all understood safety first and foremost. But what I learned from that call was that we cannot wait to start discussing what it could look like, and that we should start preparing for what it could look like with students, so that at least this process of further cancellations, if it goes in that direction, has their input on what they value. And I think that's starting to happen throughout the state. The day after the phone call with the students, I asked superintendents to start planning with their high school principals and their class advisors And I'll be very pleased to share with you. I've already heard from a couple of districts that have it all planned out already. If it happens in the fall, if it happens in December, it does matter, and it should matter to us to make sure that we're planning.
Yeah, it's good to hear that we will be celebrating the class of 2020s one way at least. And right now, most of the state, we're doing distance learning. It's very complicated. It's been a bumpy ride for many districts, including mine here at Amity High School. How do you think distance learning is going? I think it's very like if you look across the state, it's very different, and there's not really one common way of it's being done.
Sure. So if we were to go back 6 months and say, in 6 months from now, we're going to be doing education totally different. If you looked at it from that perspective, I think we're doing really well.
Yeah.
I think we've
They didn't
managed
close this
to.
plan overnight.
Yes, yeah, exactly. And let's keep in mind, we often plan for the ideal, like everybody's going to be available at home, everybody's going to be waiting in front of the computer or waiting to pick up a packet. We're dealing with a crisis simultaneously. So we're dealing with students and family members who are facing insecurity of health or concerned about loved ones who have to go into work regularly while we're changing education. So there are very, very glaring inequities that rose to the surface here that we have to address, and we have to be bold about addressing them. But I don't want to discount the fact that overnight we changed how we do education in Connecticut, and people have stepped up to the challenge. We've fed over 1 million students, or 1 million meals have been served. We have distributed thousands and thousands of materials and laptops, and we've created an infrastructure of IT to support that. I'm amazed at what our educators have been able to do. And by educators, I mean custodians, IT people, cafeteria teachers, paraeducators, principals, leaders. So I'm very impressed with it, but I know we have a lot of work to do to make sure that it's high quality for all students in Connecticut.
Yeah, and it is pretty remarkable that this whole distance learning plan was put together in such a short period of time. I think one thing that some parents aren't happy about is that there isn't that some schools don't have live instruction. I know in my school we have some live instruction, but it is optional. But I know like some elementary students, they're having no live instruction and they're just having packets, and it really comes down to the parent. Do you think there should be live instruction for students?
So there's a question, a combination of what works for that community is best. And the reality is you also have to take into account that for many of our students, um, live instruction or synchronous instruction where students are sitting in front of the computer or in front of something at a certain time may not be an option. So if my parent works at a grocery store or works as a nurse and has to leave the house, and I'm an 8-year-old child and I have no one to assist me with that, then it's less likely that that child will be able to do that. So we have to be creative in how we deliver instruction and be flexible to the realities that are happening in Connecticut. In a conversation with superintendents and Board of Education members yesterday, I talked a little bit about we have to keep in mind that we are still planning for the ideal, but it's less than ideal out there. And we have many students whose lives have been disrupted. I know of a family where I live where the mother and the daughter were separated because the mother works in a hospital and the child has a condition where her immune system is weakened. She can't be with her mother. And the emotional toll of not being with your mother for 2 weeks makes it difficult for her to have, that experience where she's sitting in front of a computer ready to learn every day at the same time.
Yeah, and I think one issue that many students have is they don't have the access to laptops and computers. And you and Governor Lamont have been working with the Partnership for Connecticut, and you're getting 60,000 laptops out to students.
Mm-hmm.
You're also working with Scholastic to get some resources out. Can you tell us about that and how these resources are going to be given out?
Sure. So the Connecticut Partnership really stepped up early, and they said, we want to help. We want to do it now. We understand equity and access matter in Connecticut, and we want to do our part. So they assembled quickly. They had a couple of virtual meetings, and they approved the purchase of 60,000 laptops to be distributed in Connecticut in communities that are less resourced. So we assembled the governor's COVID-19 learning from home task force, made up of superintendents and people that understand the logistics of how districts work so that the distribution of the materials could be done efficiently, but also safely. So they're doing that work. They're working with the computer companies to get these computers delivered to Connecticut as soon as possible to get them distributed. Similarly, several weeks ago, we were working with Scholastic, who generously donated online resources for all of Connecticut, and we engaged with them to see if we can provide materials for students who don't have access to online learning. And they worked together. I mean, we talked to the president, the local person, and we just put our heads together to say, what could we do for kids now? So what they offered was for those students from K to 8, because we know their education matters, and not having access limits their ability to access education. They're putting together 187,000 work package with books and materials that students could do, free professional development for staff. And we were fortunate to have the Nuyi family, Indra and Raj Nuyi, say, we're going to pick up the tab for this so this could happen. So they're working on getting those materials ready and distributing that in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, and there's such a big gap in the access for resources, and there's students that have a huge advantage when they have their own personal laptop or something, and that would help them in their grades. And you sent out guidance 2 days ago that said that maybe schools should rethink their grading strategies, and maybe move to a pass-fail system. Can you talk about that and why you made that recommendation?
So we're looking nationally at what best practices are and how we could try to maintain some sense of normalcy while also taking into account the varying differences in experiences for students. I have students in Connecticut that have not missed a beat. They have laptops, they have connectivity, they have parents that are fortunate enough to be able to work from home, assisting them. They may have a school system that has tremendous online resources already, and they can connect and literally continue with the work that they had prior to the COVID-19. Then I have other districts that students might have moved into that district, don't have a laptop. The district does not have the online resources. So that student, good intentions and wants to be engaged, has more obstacles to that. Yeah. So the work that the student does and the effort that they put into it should be taken into account. And I worry that if we don't adapt our grading policies, it's potential that we're going to have a lot of students that are not accessing education, number one, but also being penalized in a negative way because of that, because of factors they can't control. What I prefer is a model where we engage with students the best they can, the best we can, move them along, continue to improve the process, and then on the other end of this, make sure that we're providing supplemental support and accelerated recovery of skills that were lost for those students that lost a lot during this time.
Yeah, when I saw this recommendation, I reached out to my superintendent, and she said that they were going to look over this April vacation. And she said, but it is up to the local community to decide. You're not going to be forcing these districts to do it. So how is it going to happen?
So, I certainly want to respect the local boards of education and their role and local district leaders. And what I'm sending is a guidance and sharing of best practices of what's happening throughout the country, in conjunction with communication with colleges to make sure that if they choose to do this, that students are not going to be penalized for it. But it is a local decision, and I respect that in Connecticut. It's guidance. If there were something that I felt very strong that had to happen, I would try to go through an executive order to go to usurp policy. But quite frankly, I think we have a lot of dedicated educators who all want the best for kids, and they know their communities better than I do. So it's important that we give local communities the opportunity to weigh in on what they think is best for their learners.
Yeah, we're sitting here on Good Friday, and actually for me, this is the start of my so-called April vacation. And this has been a little bit of controversy. The New York State, they decided to cancel their April break, but Connecticut did not make that decision. There are a couple schools that have decided to continue the remote instruction through this break. Why did you decide not to get involved with that and cancel the April vacation?
So, look, you're probably the only kid on that starts their April vacation with a tie and a suit on, and is interviewing. So I got to tell you, man, you should be getting graduation credit for this.
Thank you.
So again, having been an educator in a district for over 20 years, and knowing that in many cases, what's good in one community doesn't necessarily work in another community, I wanted to value the input of local decision makers. So some communities have been hit much harder in Connecticut than other communities. The need for that week to recover and maybe develop materials while students are not in session, or I know some districts are taking this week to coordinate better distribution of materials so that when they come back, the students will have better materials and have better access. So I don't want to make a decision that would prevent a district from being able to move forward with distance learning. We've discussed with superintendents the pros and cons. We also have to remember that many of our educators have been working with this distance learning from one day to the next, and they've been trying their very best, and they need a week to kind of breathe, catch up, take stock, and then be more effective when they come back. While other districts have communicated with me that they feel that a break in the learning might disengage students in a way that it's going to be hard to re-engage them. So again, I value the input from the education communities, and I know that they know their communities, and I trust that they can make decisions that, based on what's best for their learners.
Yeah, and how has the engagement been when you're talking to superintendents? What are they saying? Like, what percentage of their students are actually engaged, doing online work and showing up to virtual classes?
Mm. I'm proud to say, Ryan, that 100% of our districts in Connecticut are engaged in distance learning. We've surveyed, we've called, we've connected with districts on a personal level. We've picked up the phone and just to make sure that we know that they're engaging their learners and trying to provide support. I heard as recently as this morning, Naugatuck School's 95% connection rate. So 95% of the students there are engaged somehow. And that's because the approach that they took there, for example, was really relational, right? Hey, Ryan, how you doing, man? How's your family doing? Are you okay? What do you need? How can I support you? Come back on. Let's talk about what your learning profile looks like, what you can do to continue that project that you were working on. What do you want to accomplish before you graduate? And how can I support you in the next 3 or 4 months to make sure you can do that? So these approaches are what we're finding is giving districts success in connecting with students. In addition to the academic materials, it's that personal connection. I'm hearing very good stories about what the connections, but I also know that in some districts, it's not that easy to Zoom a kid or Google Classroom and have the students connect. And we're trying to find ways to connect the students that have been disengaged and find out what's happening. And in very rare cases where we have not heard from students, we engage with our partners in the community to make sure that the child is okay, number one.
Yeah, and one thing that a lot of juniors were planning on doing this year is taking tests such as the SAT and the ACT. And juniors were supposed to take the SAT in school in March, and that was obviously canceled. I know that the governor waived the requirement to have that type of test, but a lot of these students count on that test to try to get into college. So are you committed to possibly having the SAT in the fall for those students that weren't able to take it?
Yeah, we're definitely committed to doing what we could do to support students, right? I think it was March 26th, the date that was set for this year. We want to make sure that students have the opportunity to take the test and do their very best, right? But we also know colleges are, we have to keep in mind colleges are also being flexible to say, well, wait a minute, the conditions weren't normal, so I'm not going to put as much on that right now, and have to take into account the fact that the student couldn't take it. I also want to make sure that students not only are academically prepared, but emotionally ready. Many of our students are dealing sadly with loss in their family, loss in their school community, and we want to make sure that students are able to feel confident to be successful before we start putting an assessment in front of them and saying, we're going to judge you on this. And I think as a state, we have the responsibility to do that for all of our learners.
Yeah, and as we finish up, I know nobody ever expected this to happen, and we weren't as prepared as we wanted to be, but we've tried to adapt. So what are you going to do in the future to make sure we're prepared for something like this? Because it's very likely that something like this could happen again.
Right. It's almost like preparing for the unexpected. I was in a communication with the superintendent this morning, and I communicated that at the end of the day, the agency needs to be open and flexible to adjust as needed. So what we've learned is we have a good infrastructure for communication. We have dedicated, committed leaders that are working together. Um, we have educators that are willing to do whatever they need to do, including get in their car and parade around the community to let their students know that it's going to be okay. We have the ingredients to continue to adapt and grow. We have to be receptive. We have to listen to students, and we have to make sure that at a moment's notice, we're prepared to change course to make sure that our students' needs are met. But I won't let this question, I won't finish the answer to this question without mentioning that we have to do a better job ensuring equitable access for all of our learners in Connecticut. This issue of inequity was there long before COVID. COVID is bringing it to the attention of people that might not have noticed it before. We have to double down on our efforts to make sure that students in Connecticut, very small state, have similar opportunities for educational success. Education is the great equalizer. We're seeing it now, and we're more committed than ever to make sure that we work boldly to provide equitable outcomes for kids.
And how have you been taking this personally? How has your daily life changed?
Yeah. So I'm sitting in my basement now. This is my new office. I'm fortunate that I'm able to work from home. I'm fortunate that my kids are able to learn from home. And, I'm adjusting like anyone else. I'm concerned that my parents stay home, my in-laws stay home. I too wonder what it's going to look like. I worry that my daughter is upset because she was in the play, in her 8th grade play. She was going to be a main character there. She was excited about learning those songs, and that looks like it's slipping away. So I have the same emotions that everyone else has. I want normalcy again. I want to make sure that we get past this without there being major loss in my community and in my family. So I have the same concerns that everyone else has, but I know that together we're going to accomplish more. And I know that the decisions that I make on a daily basis are important. And that's why I take into account the different perspectives. And I know that as an educator, it's my job to serve, and whatever that means, we'll do it. We'll do it
And have you
together.
had any time to unwind, maybe catch up on any movies, TV shows?
Oh man, I've been on Netflix more than I care to tell you. I'm kind of revisiting The Office. I did the whole Tiger King thing. Let me see what else. Different movies, but getting outside is good too. The weather's been good for a couple of days, so I'm getting outside. I'm excited about cutting my grass soon. Believe it or not, getting outdoors is good. Walking. I like to take walks. I got to talk to my kids a little bit more, which was pretty cool. So we're making the best of it.
Yeah, and I want to finish up with a question that I ask all my in all my interviews, and I know you can't actually visit a pizza place now. You could get pickup. What is your favorite pizza place in the state of Connecticut?
I'm going to get in trouble if I just say one, but I'm going to have to go with one that I've been eating since I was a little kid in Meriden, Little Rendezvous. Have you ever heard of Little Rendezvous?
I have not, but I'll check it out now.
You have to check it out. Brick oven, it's been around forever. One of my favorites, not only because the pizza is delicious, but because it brings so many memories of a great life where I've been able to share pizza with people that I love, and I had it with my parents when I was little, and now my kids have it, and food, like many other things, brings people together. So Little Rendezvous, check it out.
I'll check it out. Commissioner, thank you very much for joining me. Stay safe and good luck during these troubling times.
Thank you, Ryan. I'm proud of you that you're taking this time to do your work and you're putting on a tie. And I wish you the best, and congratulations on your senior year. I wish you the very best. All right. Take care.
Thank you for watching. I'm Ryan Anastasio, reporting for Raving Ryan.